Hello, this is the Growth League podcast. My name is Caleb Clark, and my mission for this show is pretty simple. It's to learn from marketers on how they're playing the great game of marketing leadership, their ideas, experiences, perspective, wins and losses, and the playbook that they've established over time. Listen, there's more than one way to lead a marketing team and a marketing function. So if you're a VP, a CMO, director, or someone aspiring to fill one of these marketing leadership roles in the future, tune in to learn from some of the best in the business. Marketing leaders today are faced with a lot of noise, a lot of opinions, perspectives, ways to do things, etc. And so I think a lot of times there can be these voices or noises or voices saying, "Hey, Dusty, you're not doing this right." For you, when you're driving home at night, whether it's gut felt or maybe something more documented and reported on, how do you know personally that, hey, I and we did a good job today fulfilling the mandate? Is there anything you rely on to?
It's a great question.
I am here with my guest, Dusty Talbert. He's the Director of Marketing at the Providence Group of Georgia. Dusty, welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you.
Awesome. Glad to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Our first chat, I was worried you're going to get in a car crash. I had you in the car, but we're here now. We're safe, and that's good. So let me start with this. I'll just jump right into it. I'd like you to give us a bit of a Cole's Notes summary of your journey as a marketing leader. Where did it all start, and kind of what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, I graduated college in 2009, and I always had an idea of going into the marketing space, and had kind of a false idea of thinking I'd always land at some kind of marketing agency and do the really cool creative brainstorming and all the fun stuff you see, on TV and movies and whatnot. And, enter the job market, and there were not a lot of jobs out there. So I ended up going into a very brief sales career, even though it was not something that I thought that I would necessarily succeed at, but I figured it would be a learning experience for me, grow some thick skin. Yeah. And I did that, kind of fell on my face a few times, but that's, those are lessons learned the hard way. And sometimes that's the best lesson to learn. So did that for a little while. And then as a newlywed as well, I was unemployed for a long time out of that first year of marriage. So it was not an ideal situation. Definitely not part of my life plan at all.
I'm sure your wife was pumped about that. What the hell did I do?
Pretty much, yeah, because considering she was still finishing up her last year of school, I was a recent grad, graduated, I had certain goals, met my GPA requirements, all that stuff. And I was like, it's just going to work out the way I planned it would. I'm going to get a job and things are going to be great.
Yep.
And it doesn't always work that way. So, she had a lot of responsibility between finishing school and being the one who had a job while I worked. My job was to find one. Yeah. And had a friend from college who was at a home building company and heard that I was looking and said, "Hey, send me your resume. We might have an opportunity for you." So I was like, "Well, I'm obviously open to start my career somewhere. So let's go." And had a phone interview with their CMO at the time, and they were very blunt and honest with me and saying, "Look, we don't have a real strong opportunity, but we have a 1-month contract where, we've just brought somebody in on the marketing side in one of our divisions. They inherited a mess, and we just need someone that can come in and just support them in any way that they need support. Would you be open to doing that?" And I was like, "Well, considering my situation right now, I don't have a job or any income." And I'm like, it's a marketing opportunity, right? And I said, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Hey, look, I will absolutely take that. I'll bet on myself. And, best case scenario, I earn my keep and we can kind of take it from there. Worst case scenario, I get experience with a reputable company and I can take that experience and go somewhere else." So turned out to where it was, month to month for 6 months.
Yeah.
And, very stressful because, that started like the latter part of September back in 2010. And you go into holidays and, you're an hourly employee. You don't earn any kind of vacation or any holiday pay time. So, on edge for 6 months, just trying to prove myself and earn my keep a little bit. And fortunately for me, 6 months later, they decided to bring me on full time. as a marketing project manager and inherited a ton of responsibility as a result of that, just through hard work and just, being coachable. I came in with literally zero experience in the business world. So I was like, look, I'm willing to come in early, stay late, outwork anybody. If you just teach me, I will soak it up like a sponge and just go. So was lucky to have a really, really good boss at the time, who was extremely patient. I was not always the brightest bulb in the in the office at all. But I was very hungry and I wanted to prove myself. My parents instilled in me from childhood, hard work goes a long way, and having a good work ethic,
Yeah.
is a way to set yourself apart. So did that, had the opportunity to really kind of touch almost anything and everything that our marketing team did. I was involved in some aspect.
Right.
So learned a bunch, built a really good foundation there. And then, got to the point where I felt like I wanted a little bit more. I wanted to kind of grow in my career and take on even more responsibility. And things opened up at another home builder who was experiencing rapid growth and needed somebody to kind of come in and take the load off of the person who was there at the time. And I did that, made that move, and we blew up. That, in a couple of months, it was the way they had kind of set up our structure was this one person who had been there was getting so overworked. They brought me in and split up our territories or communities kind of 50-50.
Yeah.
Um, and on paper, that seemed like the right approach because, you just split up the work and, now you have half the workload, you have the other half. But we had very different working styles. And because of the workload, she had just gotten super disorganized, I would say. And then she had some other things going on in her life where she ended up leaving within a couple of months. And so pretty quickly after starting there, I was a one-man show taking on a lot of extra work. So it required a lot of prioritization and open communication with executive leadership on letting them know kind of where my boundaries were. As a dad at the point, I had,
Mm.
one son. We were planning to have more children, and making sure that I was fully there when I was at work, but also making time for a home life as
Yeah.
well. And then just, again, keeping lines of communication open with them.
Yeah.
And when we needed to scale and bring on additional staff in the marketing department, told them that I would let them know and I would give them my feedback on how I would prefer to set that up and structure it. And they were very open to that, which was really, really nice to see. And over the course of 5 years, we brought on a team of, there were 5 of us. So we had like 4 coordinators that I would manage. And we scaled from about 350, 400 homes a year. By the time I left this organization, we were above 850 homes a year,
Wow.
just in one division. Then we actually scaled to 4 additional divisions throughout the Southeast. So got to
Wow.
kind of lead the marketing efforts for a little while on scaling and opening up new business and new territories.
I want to point on one thing here, which before I forget it, and that is, I think it's a really important reminder that I would say, regardless of where you are in your career, but especially at the beginning, being humble, being hungry, and in your case, you actually were faced with the constraint of a month-to-month contract. But wouldn't it be great if we could internalize whether we're on a full salary, full, like, maybe we all are on month-to-month contracts, right? And
Yeah,
you got to
yeah,
think about it that way. And so with all of it, it seems to me that the story's kind of started with humble and hungry, hey, put me in, coach, type thing, and then
yeah.
go from there. Started to experience some success. What drew you? Because you've been at Providence now for 7 months. What drew you to that opportunity, and where does Providence fit in the market, and what drew you there?
Yeah, so Providence is a home building company that I've been aware of for years. And I actually visited their office and saw their design center probably back in, 7, 8 years ago. And, my early experience in home building was really much more on the pure production home builder that was really more tailored towards first-time buyers for the primary target market.
Yeah.
Providence Group is a little more on the elevated lifestyle, elevated home product line, so higher price points, In a lot of cases, better locations, better school districts that are in a very high concentration within the nicest suburbs of Metro Atlanta.
Okay.
Uh, so, I've always respected what they did from a home building perspective, from a marketing perspective as well. And what drew me specifically to this opportunity was connections and people. It's one of those things where, industries tend to be pretty tight knit. Home
Yeah.
building is definitely one of those. It's a super small world, regardless of how big this world really is.
Yeah.
This one is super small. So, the past 2 years of my career were really odd, if I could be completely honest with you, where it almost kind of came full circle where I got into home building, coming out of unemployment. Um, I had gotten out of home building again on my own terms and went into another real estate uh, wholesale kind of company. Did that for a while, and then things went south on the sales side. So I was laid off from that position, went somewhere else through a connection, and did that for a few months, and then they decided to close up their business. So I was then again out of a job, but had really good connections in this space, and the Providence Group had a position that wasn't technically really open, but they were essentially going to create one because they had somebody that was over marketing, but
Mm.
they were really over marketing, sales, and strategy. So they were wearing too many hats to really
Right.
devote their full self to one thing or the other.
Right.
And luckily for me, with connections and my level of experience, they kind of wanted to bring somebody in so that I could take that stuff over and then allow that person to then fully devote themselves to the role that needed the highest level of priority for them.
Right. And that tees me my question up next, which is how would you say, or what would you say you get paid to do today? What is your mandate? Like obviously leading a marketing function, people have certain definitions of what that means, but how do you see what you get paid to do?
Yeah, I would say my biggest thing that I get paid to do, my number one KPI, if you will, is driving traffic. That's the biggest thing. It's sales enablement, really. That's what we as a marketing team are really
Right.
here for.
Right.
A lot of folks view sales and marketing as one, but I would say we're very much different and we're separate, but we're
Yeah.
very much arm in arm because we start at the front end of the funnel and we as a marketing team really own the customer experience. So we have to make sure that we do a great job from a branding perspective, a content perspective to set the stage early with the prospective home buyer
Yeah.
on how they engage with us as a brand,
Right.
and then enable the sales team to take it from there once we drive somebody through the front door.
Right. Well put. I mean, it's sales enablement, I think, is a is a term that a lot of marketers often forget. They think marketing's over here, sales over here, but we're there to drive opportunity.
Yeah.
Within that role and within that mandate, what do you lean on pretty heavily, and what would you consider to be your superpower as a marketing leader? Something that you've gone back to time and time again because it makes you feel like you could run through a
Yeah.
brick.
I like to think that I'm a good blend of creative and analytical at the same time. We have a very diverse team here that I manage. Some that are very, very creative, much more technical than I am as well. But I've got a good knack and understanding of all of that. But I'm not necessarily an IT professional
Right.
or a designer by trade, but I can do some of those things as well as manage those people that are. So I would say using that blend of that knowledge is probably the superpower for
Yeah.
me. And being able to make sure that I'm extremely OCD, to be completely honest. I'm one who, again, prefer to be busy, not bored. I'm going to find something productive that's going to need to be done.
Right.
And then probably combating the flip side of that would be prioritization. I feel like I've got a pretty good knack for there's always a lot of things happening in the home building world, but knowing what needs to be prioritized over something else is extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And that's something I feel like I do pretty well.
What's an area that you're willing to admit that is a struggle for you, or a challenge for you, that you're actively looking for growth in as a marketing leader?
Start growth really for me. There's always new technology. And so it's always making sure that I stay up to date on what that stuff is. So again, I'm not the most technical, but I'm fairly technical. So I would say that that's one for me where I've got a guy on my team that is extremely technical and
Yeah.
extremely creative at the same time. So I try to make sure we get anybody on our team to operate in what I would call their genius zone.
Hmm.
So, I
Tell me
want to make
about what does that mean?
put them in the best place for success, right? So if I've got somebody who's very much creative minded, but not necessarily super organized, I know that I'm super organized and he's creative, so we can help each other by working together and allow him to operate in that space creatively, but
Right.
use my project management skills and my OCD side to make sure we stay on target with key dates and key deliverables and things of that nature, but
Yeah.
allow him to fully operate on the creative side.
Right. Well, you bring up a team member. Tell me a little bit about your team and what does the structure look like?
Yeah. So from our side, we've got myself as a director of marketing, kind of heading up the entire operation from the marketing perspective. We have a creative director that handles all of he's actually a former videographer and photographer.
Yeah.
So very well versed in the photography and videography space. So from a content perspective, he leads the charge on a lot of that stuff, with some input from the rest of the team. He's also super technical. So he's the one who really owns and manages the website, works with our development team on all of that stuff. And then you've got a marketing manager who helps oversee a lot of the day-to-day nitty-gritty details, making sure that the sales team has all their collateral up to date. We have email communications going out on a regular basis, checking the analytics, things of that nature. And a couple months ago, just brought on an additional person as well as a marketing coordinator to help with even more of the day-to-day operations and getting sales orders fulfilled, more website updates as far as interactive site plans, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually trying to add a little more to her plate because she didn't necessarily go to school for marketing,
Right.
but she's extremely helpful, always has a great attitude. So trying to make sure we continue to build people up and allow them to take on some more responsibility.
That's great. You got a team, you got some process, you put people's in their zones of genius, which I think is awesome. From your perspective, in a setup like yours, you have about, a lean and mean team, but expertise in the right areas. Beyond that, though, as a marketing system as a whole, what do you believe, or why do you believe marketing systems fail?
Probably improper planning, and maybe in some cases the fear of failure as well. Like we always use the term at organizations I've been at in the past of fail forward. Like if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Like there's gonna be mistakes made along the way,
Mhm.
and those are the ones that you need to learn from. So
Yeah.
you can't always play it safe. And it's getting proper buy-in as well. It's one of those,
Mhm.
I'm very process driven. So coming in within the first couple of months and I told him early on, I'm going to be extremely quiet. I'm an observer. I'm an analytical thinker. So I'm going to just digest and take in a lot of information. And then once I see small areas for, where we can kind of turn the dial a little bit and make some improvements, that's when I'm going to start getting super vocal. And one of those for us on the marketing side was just implementing a project management software solution where we can make sure that we keep everything in one place and stay on target, because we would just take notes on a Word doc
Yeah.
and then I don't know at that point who was going in and checking anything. So I was like, if we don't have a central hub where we all go and see this,
Yeah.
we're gonna miss some things.
What does integration look like for you between the marketing and the sales function? You talk about sales enablement, but what are some of the, processes, rituals, even mindset, communication,
Yeah.
cadence? What does that look like?
So we have two directors of sales that are super experienced on their side of things. And one of the things that I wanted to start bringing back to the forefront here at the Providence Group is not only having our weekly marketing meetings where the marketing team meets and talks about things, but I'm like, if we're supposed to be in a collaborative and symbiotic relationship with sales, we've got to pull the directors of sales into these meetings to make sure that we're focusing on the right things
Right.
and making sure that we have our data, we have our reports. We might have in mind of, well, we really want to prioritize this thing, but if it's not really the right thing to focus our time and attention on, let's pull them in and get their feedback and make sure that we're supporting them every way that we can.
Right. You mentioned, so tied to that, you mentioned getting buy-in as a big thing that you're doing all the time, whether that be from C-suite, sales team, even other departments unrelated. What approach have you established over time for getting that elusive buy-in? I say
So
elusive because it's oftentimes elusive, but
it
curious
is.
to know your thoughts.
Yeah, so we have weekly meetings with the management team, and one of those things that we're working to kind of get back on the table is beyond just having those weekly meetings with the ops team and going through high-level overviews of certain priorities within certain areas of responsibility. Perfect example would be, if we're opening a community, making sure that we're having certain meetings set up, what we would call milestone meetings, so that everybody's on the same page.
Mhm.
And getting the right buy-in of knowing that who's responsible for what, and then what's really going to be preventing someone from picking up the baton and moving forward because there might be something that we're relying on from somebody else.
Right. So if I'm hearing you right on the milestones concept there, you're getting buy-in and approval along the way versus waiting until the thing is done, whatever the thing is, and
Yeah.
then hopefully it's bought into or yeah.
Yeah. Biggest thing there is just keeping lines of communication open because you might have a quick conversation in the hallway, but by the time I get back to my desk, I might have completely forgotten what we just talked about.
Right.
So having those regular meetings and keeping the lines of communication as open as possible.
Right. Marketing leaders today are faced with a lot of noise, a lot of opinions, perspectives, ways to do things, etc. And so I think a lot of times there can be these voices or noises or voices saying, "Hey, Dusty, you're not doing this right." Or for you, when you're driving home at night, whether it's gut felt or maybe something more documented and reported on, how do you know personally that, hey, I and we did a good job today fulfilling the mandate? Is there anything you rely on to?
It's a great question. Um, I think a lot of it for us, as far as something that's tangible, is the project management software and knowing that we're keeping things moving along the right path.
Right.
Um, and then, other than that, making sure that the sales team is happy and that they're succeeding. We could feel really good about, hey, we made a really cool social media post and we thought we had great levels of engagement on it. But if a community is not getting traffic and they're not converting traffic to sales,
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot for us to feel great about in that regard.
Right.
So it's always making sure we've got a finger on the pulse of what each of them is doing. And it's a roller coaster. You're going to have some where they've had great weeks and great months, and then it flips and they may or may not. And it's going to be always making sure that you're not satisfied and
Right.
you're always pushing forward.
Right. Is there anything that doesn't require the validation of other parties, sales team or whatever, but maybe something more intrinsically felt for you personally that you're like doing a good job? I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, I think team harmony is a big way to kind of to judge that. And it's one of those where, we're actively working on modifying meeting agendas and making sure that we set time to just be together as a group beyond work, whether it's just a team lunch once a week or once a month, because we're people. We don't want to see them as just you're the director of marketing or you're the creative director and that's all you are. Like we're people. We
Yeah.
should have relationships with those people and see them beyond what they are in the workplace as well. And I think that helps build camaraderie as a team. And that builds harmony as a team so that when you have a favor, you need to ask for something else or you have to shift their priorities, they're much more receptive to that.
Totally. I agree. Whether it be at Providence or organizations in the past, if you've had experience working with a combination of internal team members and external partners, what have you done to, well, first of all, have you been in those experiences where you've had external partners that you've worked with?
Yeah. As far as working with outside vendors and whatnot, it's, making sure that we have somebody who owns that relationship
Right.
and it's on a lot of that responsibility. And that was one that I had early on in my career. We had a creative agency where everybody across the country needed certain things from them, but I was their primary point of contact, making sure that those things were happening when they needed to.
Right.
So, being strict to a certain extent on deadlines and turning things in on time when requested, but also being that ear for the folks who might be experiencing difficulties or issues with that vendor so I can then take those problems to them. So it was certainly a challenge. It ended up going down a path where we found a better solution to I won't say problem, but we found a better way to attack the situation than using who we were using,
Gotcha.
but using software solutions to kind of fix the problem.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And you're the non-IT guy, so you had some support figuring that out.
Yeah, for sure.
Where is there any area that comes to mind for you when I talk about, or when I ask about, what does growth for Dusty look like as a marketing leader? Is an area that you're looking to really just kind of expand on within the next chapter of your career? Anything come to mind there?
I would say the biggest thing for me is just continuing to grow as far as, leadership goes, and making sure that I've always tried to operate as kind of what I would call a player coach or a servant leader.
Mhm.
I'm one who almost like I always equate things to sports. I grew up and played tons of sports growing up. I'm still coaching my kids in soccer right now. So if you look at it from like a soccer team perspective, like trying to operate as the captain of the team,
Right.
where you can lead others by being vocal, you can lead by example and doing things the right way. I try to operate in that regard in the work environment on a day-to-day basis. But there's always room to grow in that regard as well. So making sure that I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and get the work done. I'm not a delegator, nor am I a micromanager. I
Yeah.
try to make sure that I give people the level of trust that they deserve and that they earn by doing their jobs.
Yeah.
But also along with that, being coachable and seeking that coachability from people who are, whether they're below me, above me, equal to me, whoever, doesn't matter. Like somebody else has insight into seeing you from a different perspective
Yeah.
and can provide constructive criticism. So seeking out coaching to continue to grow in that regard, and having essentially like an accountability partner,
Yeah.
lack of better terms.
That's awesome. Leave us with this, two things. Number one is, if you were talking to a marketing coordinator or manager that had aspirations of leading a function, what is one thing you would leave them with if you just had a quick 5 minutes to chat with them? What's one thing you would say, hey, if I can leave you with one thing, here it is?
Yeah, a big piece of advice I got early in my career is, don't bring a problem to your supervisor. Bring the problem with two or three solutions
Yeah.
so that you're showing that you're critically thinking on, here's my situation, how would I address it?
Right.
Providing those options to your superior so then they can then make the best judgment call. That's
Right.
a way, that way we would call it managing up.
Right.
So help you grow in your career. That would be a huge area to just show that you're wanting to grow as a leader. And then the more you do that, you're continuing to grow into a leadership role.
That's interesting, hey, because I think a lot of people don't do that because they're fearful that their ideas aren't good, but that's not the point. Like all three options could be total shit,
Yeah.
right? It's not
Yeah, for sure.
it's a critical thing. You can swear on this one.
All good.
Um,
Yeah, it just shows that you're taking initiative to think outside the box versus I have a problem, here it is, and dropping it in your lap and saying, please fix it for me.
yeah.
You know,
What about advice, quick advice for a well tenured marketing leader that is looking to just evolve or grow or be better? What's one thing you could share there?
for that, I would say, in our world, exploring AI is going to be a huge one. It's going to be transforming everything we do. We use it on a day-to-day basis for certain things. So, being adaptable to change is going to be a big one, especially in the marketing world and the way that technology grows today.
Yeah.
It's going to almost be an adapt or die kind of environment. So that would be the biggest piece of advice I would say. And, I would also combat that with, regardless of how high up you are, how experienced you are, remaining in an attitude of humility and coachability in any role is going to be huge, because nobody's perfect. We don't all have it all figured out. And there's always a little bit of room for improvement, regardless of where you're at.
That's awesome. Dusty, thanks for giving us a little bit of an exposure into the way you're playing this game. Lots of game left to be played, and so thank you very much for sharing your perspective, everyone. This is Dusty Talbert, and he is the director of marketing at the Providence Group. Thanks so much, man.
Awesome. Thank you.